One was convincing, the other took a little more Wild magic. We recap both wins for the Wild against Chicago over the weekend. And Joel Eriksson Ek's return, Jared Spurgeon's return, and Kaapo Kahkonen's continued brilliance, all today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, Locked on Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts, also available anytime you want to listen. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we recap both wins against Chicago over the weekend, plus how the Minnesota Wild have finally put their ideal lines together as the season continues. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer. And evidently, if you're watching on YouTube, new Sith Lord didn't realize that my outfit combo for today, the hood that I had, made me look like I was in one of the Star Wars movies. So we'll go with it because we're having a great time. A victory Monday as the Minnesota Wild took care of business against Chicago, not once, but twice. They beat Chicago 5-1 on Friday night in Chicago and followed it up with yet another overtime winner at home on Saturday night, 4-3 in OT. Another empty net goal to tie late in the third period in that second game. But it was very interesting how we saw two different styles of play from the Wild. Obviously, on Friday night, came out of the gate just guns blazing and ended up making light work of Chicago in that first game. The Blackhawks responded as we expected that they would, but it seemed fitting that Saturday's game was in a thrilling overtime win to cap off another Hockey Day Minnesota. Seemed like that was only the right way for the Wild to win in Saturday's game. But all in all, the Wilds pick up two wins. And if you heard yesterday's show, are now 2-0 after that dreaded 3-4-2 stretch for the Wild, where it seemed as though everything was falling apart and that there was no chance for the team to right the ship or to possibly keep the successful season going. Again, if you're watching on video, huge eye roll. So obviously a lot of that aimed at the article that we broke down on yesterday's show, but a lot of interesting things to pull from Friday and Saturday's wins. Obviously, we saw the return of Joel Eriksson Ek and Jared Spurgeon to the lineups, and they proved notable in their return for Joel Eriksson Ek. Picked up a goal over the weekend on the power play, reunited with his favorite line mates, Marcus Foligno and Jordan Greenway. And something that we're going to look a little further at later this week, but I will talk about it today, is that I think this is the best line combos that the Minnesota Wild have had, at least in the Dean Evason tenure. If we're going to go any further than that, going to need to do a little research first and see if we can find some of the other line combos from throughout Wild history. I'm ready to go as far as to say that these could be some of the best line combos in franchise history. But before we can really make that claim, got to do a little digging first. So Eriksson Ek comes back, slots in with Foligno and Greenway. He scores. Foligno scores the OT winner against the Blackhawks on Saturday. Greenway has a couple of assists over the weekend. We see more good stuff from the Boldy, Gaudreau, Fiala line. Fiala with a goal in over the weekend. And then the Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello line. Kaprizov with a couple of goals. Hartman with a couple of goals. And Zuccarello helping both guys out in those instances. So you see an interesting byproduct of that. Is that now that you've got those top three lines rolling at the best production-wise that they've been all season, Dean can lean on them now. He can lean on them a little more than he has in the past. And we saw that in Saturday's game where it was obviously a lot closer. And so the Wilds, they cut the minutes down for that fourth line. Dewar, Duhaime, and Sturm all playing right around between 6 and 7 minutes. You get over 20 minutes for the entirety of the Eriksson Ek, Foligno, and Greenway line, and also the Kaprizov line as well. So when clutch situations warrant that the Wild need to, they need to ask a little more from those guys, any of those three lines are going to be ready to rock and to give the team what they need for those clutch moments. So that is an interesting byproduct. They're all clicking at just such an amazing level. Kirill Kaprizov is continuing what has been just the most torrid play of his young career. I think he's up to 35 points in his last 21 games, and he's on pace for over 100 points this season. And it's just absurd what he is currently doing. Ryan Hartman continues to get it done. Marcus Foligno continues to get it done. Joel Eriksson Ek picking up right where he left off. So just to, again, kind of rub salt in the wound from yesterday, just when this Wild team was written off, they get people back. And because they were doing enough to just hang around with these injuries, Jonas Brodin coming back soon. I would imagine Cam Talbot will be back this week. The Wilds held serve while those players were out, while the postponements were going on, and now they're going to be at full strength, and they are going to be a problem for the rest of the NHL. So a great weekend for the Wild. Of course, Hockey Day Minnesota on Saturday, a great showcase for the state of Minnesota, capped off with a thrilling overtime win. So a lot of positives to take from the two games over the weekend. When we come back, though, I want to dive a little further in to one of the big heroes of the weekend as well, continuing what has been just an amazing stretch of hockey for him, Kaapo Kahkonen. We'll talk about Kaapo's numbers over the past several games and what the Wild should do going forward with their two goalies. That is coming up next here on Locked On Wild. It is 2022, and that means New Year's resolutions are in full swing. If you want to look a little better, eat a little better, may I present to you Built Bar. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, and I'm even going to double down. Better than a candy bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and the average Built Bar contains right around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Your average candy bar contains almost double that, with 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So now is the perfect time to take all of those candy bars in your secret stash, give them to somebody else. I'm not advocating throwing candy away. Give them to somebody else, fill those secret stashes with Built Bars, and your 2022 will be off to a better start than you could ever have imagined. So head to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off of your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, and again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Just as a reminder, Locked On Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. So for Kaapo Kahkonen, in his last, we'll just say in the month of January, Kaapo has started 7 games in the month of January. He's 5-0-1 in those games. He has a 2.19 goals against average and a .937 save percentage. Nearly had a shutout against the Blackhawks on Friday, if not for a very unfortunate and kind of weird situation, in which it looked like he tripped, but ended up not being able to collect the save in the 5-1 win on Friday. With Cam Talbot out, we kind of were looking at, okay, which Kaapo we're going to get here? Are we going to get the guy that struggled against the St. Louis Blues, got just absolutely just pelted by the Blues, or are we going to see him take a step up and show that he deserves to get more starts than he has been getting? Well, we have gotten a version of Kaapo that I think is the best case scenario for this team. You look at what he's done in some of these games. Came in relief of Talbot in the Winter Classic, but against Boston, gave up just 2 goals, got a win. Went against Washington, gave up 2 goals, including stopping the Capitals on all of their shots in the shootout. Beat the Anaheim Ducks 7-3. Held serve with the Avalanche, and the Wild ended up not being able to score in the shootout. So really can't fault Kaapo because he only gave up the 1 shootout goal in that loss to the Avalanche. And then he turned around and he had great performances against the Blackhawks both Friday and Saturday. And he's alleviating a lot of concerns with the goalie position that I think most fans have had with what we've seen from Talbot this year. Talbot has been giving up more goals than we've been accustomed to seeing from him throughout the course of his career. And so to have a goalie that is able to put less pressure on the offense, put less pressure on the defense by making some of those critical saves at various points throughout the game. And it's going to come down the stretch to the workload. That's the magic question with this goalie situation. What is the splits? What do the splits look like? Who gets more starts? Who gets fewer starts? And for a while in the beginning of the season, it was a 60-20 split. I know I've brought that up a bunch, but it bears repeating because that was not sustainable. That's not sustainable with Talbot and Kaapo because Kaapo is going to get rusty and Talbot is going to get overworked. So you take that 60-20 and bump it down to I don't know, 45-35 or 50-30. Even just bumping it down a little bit will help alleviate the pressure on both goalies. But I ultimately think that Kaapo deserves a ton of the starts here down the stretch because if the Wild are going to make the deep playoff run that we're hoping, well, they're going to have to get some good goalie play from both Kaapo and from Cam. Now, another element that I think is going to help out in helping keep both goalies happy and productive is the inevitable return of Jonas Brodin. The team has, for whatever reason, seemed to do pretty good without Jared Spurgeon in the lineup, but you pull Brodin out and it's a completely different story. Although playing without both of them, the team did fine. I mean, 3-4-2 is not great, but it's also not bad considering how most of the rest of the teams in the league are just continuing to kind of flounder. So getting those 2 guys back is going to have a huge impact on the goaltending and the rest of the defense as well, because everybody slots down into their normal spots. So you don't have to worry about playing Jordie Benn, 18 minutes a night. You're going to be able to go 20. You're going to be able to go 20, 20, 20 with Brodin, Spurgeon, Dumba. You could go 20 with Goligoski and then figure it out from there because those top 4 are set. So once the Wild get them back, that's going to help out the goalie situation. But Kaapo Kahkonen certainly deserves more of the playing time than he has been getting, and I think this stretch that he's been on should hopefully help convince Bill Guerin of that as well. One thing that I took issue with before we really dive into these line combinations that the Wild have found and that I think they're going to go with for the rest of the season. Kailin Addison getting sent back to the taxi squad in favor of Jordie Benn with Jared Spurgeon returning to the lineup. I don't like it. I would much rather see Addison, somebody who gives you a little something, can help on the power play, is more of an offense-oriented defenseman that is still capable of playing defense himself. Jordie Benn at this point, Jordie Benn is like a replacement level player. And I think that's probably being a little generous. And so you have to ask yourself as an organization, you have to ask yourself as a team, would you rather have the live body that you can plug into the lineup and is going to play the minutes, is not maybe going to hurt you a ton, but is also really not going to help you at all? Would you rather have option A, or would you rather have option B, who is somebody that can help drive the puck up the ice, is younger, has a little more, flair and confidence with his game, somebody that can help you on the power play, and somebody who is really good at helping to drive the action? Would you rather have the live body replacement player or Kalen Addison in this point, who figures immensely into the future of this team, especially with, and this will be another topic that we discuss later in the week. My thoughts have changed completely as to one of the big questions for the offseason as to whether or not the Wild trade Kevin Fiala or Matt Dumba. I have flipped completely from where I was before the season started to where I'm at right now. But as I mentioned, that's going to be a full episode coming later this week. But with what the likely scenario will be for that dilemma for Bill Guerin, if he does decide to trade Matt Dumba, then you're going to need Calen Addison to come up and play a ton. And so these situations where you throw Jordie Benn in there, I don't like it. I know why they're doing it, because it's the veteran presence, and you're not asking that line to do a ton. But at the same time, like, you could get something from that spot if you put Addison into the lineup. And so I don't know if that will be the case going forward. It's going to be fascinating to see what this team does defensively when Jonas Brodin returns, because the decor has remained steady despite all the players coming in and out of the lineup on basically a nightly basis. So going to be interesting to see how Bill Guerin handles that. But I would like to see some more playing time from Kalen Addison for sure. And I know State of Hoppy would agree from the Soda Pod. So I'll give him a plug there. We're looking out for the Addison supporters, trying to get Kalen some more playing time here down the stretch. So a little bit of a gripe from the weekend, but at the same time, Kaapo's been great, and the decor has been great as well. We're going to finish today's episode by taking a look at how the Minnesota Wild, after all this time, all the searching, have finally found the line combos that they're going to roll with for the rest of the season. We will talk about that coming up here on Locked On Wild. BetOnline.ag would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline.ag remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website for you to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure you use the promo code LOCKEDON to get the party started. The NFL playoffs in full swing, as well as the NBA and college basketball, the NHL, boxing, and UFC. They have everything all the way down to your favorite Vegas casino games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your primero listen of the day. And for the Minnesota Wild, It took a little while. It took some players coming back from injury. It took some players getting called up into the lineup. These line combinations are the best that we've seen under Dean Evason, and these line combinations are here to stay. You have the Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello line, which has been so good over the last month plus. Talked about the numbers for Kirill Kaprizov in his last 20 games, 15 goals and 20 assists in those last 21 games. So he's basically an assist per game and has 15 goals in that span. All of that coincides with both of his teammates on his line, and it's no coincidence that Ryan Hartman continues to just shatter his offensive marks with 17 goals now on the season, and Matt Zuccarello into double figures with goals with 11, and he has a ton of assists on the season because the Wild, first and foremost on that top line, have a guy who makes his teammates better in Kirill Kaprizov. He is capable of making everybody that he plays with better. And so having teammates that are able to get him the puck, but are also able to capitalize on him doing the same, gives the Minnesota Wild one of the most dangerous top lines that they've had in franchise history. And I'm not trying to be hot take-ish in that regard. It's a fact. Just look at the numbers. This line is producing at a level that we really haven't seen. I mean, 30 goal scorers just in general for this team have been few and far in between. And the Wild look like they're going to have two on the same line. And Zuccarello is probably going to finish with anywhere between 20 to 25, maybe going to get close to 30 goals on the season. That's just something that we haven't seen with this franchise. So that top line is lethal and dangerous. They're versatile. Ryan Hartman brings a level of grit and defense to that grouping. Kirill, the uber playmaker. And Zuccarello is not too shabby with the puck in his hands either. So you start with that line. You go to the enforcer line. Greenway, Eriksson Ek, and Foligno. This line has, over the last couple of seasons, ever since they got put together as a combination, they have been the steadying force for this team because they can go up against the top lines of the opponent and they can shut them down. And Joel Eriksson Ek, very capable of scoring himself. Marcus Foligno adding to that party this year. And Jordan Greenway, I don't really get how it works, but Jordan Greenway is just the secret sauce that makes the whole thing go together. And so you have that top line. You don't have to worry about them trying to slow down the opponent's top line. Get the enforcers out there. Get Eriksson Ek and Foligno and Greenway out there to do their thing. And this year especially, they have been adding much more offense to the mix as well. That line is as consistent and as reliable as this team has had since Dean Evason took over. And so that line continues to play very, very well. We see a pattern with the third line, and I hesitate to call it the third line because it's too good to be a traditional third line. Kevin Fiala and Matt Boldy and Freddie Gaudreau as the center for now is very reminiscent of the Kaprizov, Zuccarello, and Hartman line. You have two playmakers on either side, and you have a center that is, yes, more of a defense-oriented center, but he still is capable of getting the puck to both guys. And it's no coincidence that as soon as Kevin Fiala teamed up with Matt Boldy, that both of their numbers just took off. And Fiala's on his standard scoring pace. He's up to 10 goals on the season. Boldy, a point-per-game player, because we've been saying it pretty much all season. Fiala was paired at the beginning of the year with Rask and Gaudreau. There's really not a whole lot of offense being driven by those two guys. Now with Boldy on the other side, he can push the pace, and he can play in tandem with Fiala, and then you have Gaudreau as the center who can kind of help set the play up from behind. So that line combination has been red hot over the last couple of weeks, which leads me to my point to finish today's episode. These will be the line combinations that we see the rest of the way. And not to throw any shade to the bottom line of Dewar, Duhaime, and Sturm, because those guys play a valuable role as well. You've got two guys who, in the words of Spoke Z, are just chaos on the ice at all times. In Brandon Duhaime and Connor Dewar, both fought on I think it was on Friday. Both fought in Friday's game, and they will go toe to toe with anybody out on the ice. That fourth line is not having to be relied on as much because the top three lines have been so good recently. And top to bottom, overall, it is going to be real interesting to see what Dean Evason does when Nick Bjugstad returns. Other than that, barring injuries, I think these four lines are set in stone because of how they've played and what they bring to this team. And top to bottom, this is a very dangerous team. So if certain outlets want to try to say that the season is spiraling out of control and is beyond saving, they certainly can do so. But I present Exhibit A, that this Minnesota Wild team is a sleeping giant right now, and they're starting to stir again. And that's going to be trouble for the rest of the NHL. That is going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Wild. So now that your first listen of the day is done, make sure to head over to Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is free and available on all podcast platforms, just like Locked On Wild. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, and we are available anytime you want to listen. You can also follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search Locked On Wild, and you'll find everything that you need to stay up to date on the Minnesota Wild every single day of the week. If a puck drops in the state of hockey, Locked On Wild has you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.